I think the Utah Jazz are very much flying under the radar so far this year, but are absolutely putting themselves in position to complete a really effective rebuild here over the next couple of years. I think the target date for being competitive is the 26-27 season. I don't think next year is realistically the target, but I think the moves that they have made recently and the moves they've made the last couple of years and the roster that they're starting to put together is a team that has a real path to contention in a couple of years if things break their way and they do a decent job of drafting. And I'm going to talk more about that in this video. This is not a team that I have addressed on this channel a single time this season, but I think it is about time for a Utah Jazz video, and I think this is the perfect time to do it, considering they just made a trade acquiring the Suns 2031 unprotected first-round pick in exchange for 3 first-rounders, but all 3 first-rounders are guaranteed to at least be kind of bad, if not very bad value first-round picks. And I'm going to explain more on why that is if you don't understand what I mean by that, and you don't understand what happened in this trade here in this video. But they get beat by the Thunder tonight. Who really cares? I'm not even going to talk about tonight's game. I don't think that the stuff that's going on this season really matters all that much when it comes to the Jazz besides their record. That's about the only thing that matters for the Utah Jazz, and the entire goal for this season is to have a bottom 4 record in basketball, which they are well on their way to doing. Besides the Wizards, I don't think there's another team in basketball as inept as the Jazz are this season overall, and that's fine. The Pelicans have been better as of late. The Raptors are relatively competitive on a lot of nights because of Emmanuel Quickley, Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, Grady Dick's improvement in his second year, a lot of guys like that. As bad as the Hornets are, Mark Williams has been awesome recently. LaMelo's too exciting of an offensive player. There's a little too much talent there probably. The Nets are tanking they're tanking their butts off, but they're a couple games better than the Jazz still. I think the Jazz very much have an inside track is basically my point to a bottom 4 record, and therefore the highest percentage chance possible at the #1 overall pick and the opportunity to draft Cooper Flagg. And let's be very real. Cooper Flagg is the perfect Utah Jazz player. And why is that, I say? Because he's white. It's very simple. That man would be an absolute superstar in Utah. They would love him. That would immediately, I think, make Utah a basketball city very quickly. As ridiculous of a reason as that is to say, I actually think there's some real validity to it. And for that reason, I kind of wonder, I think it's possible the NBA might have a little more of a role in these types of things than we know at times. I wouldn't be totally shocked if Utah were to get the #1 overall pick this season. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if they did, it would be interesting, because Cooper Flagg and Lauri Markkanen, and all of a sudden you have a duo of guys who, #1, Utah's gonna love them. #2, they have the nucleus to a team that can compete relatively quickly. And they didn't trade Lauri Markkanen this past summer. I kind of expected that they were going to, but they didn't. They then signed him to an extension. Now there is always the possibility that he were to get traded anyway. And there's certainly a lot of other guys that are definitely inviting more trade attention and more trade discussion, especially recently for the Jazz. And I think they're going to wind up making moves at the deadline, moves in the offseason, all that type of stuff, and offloading pieces for even more assets. But what they have done now with this Suns Jazz trade is they're going to have their own pick this year in 2025. Shout out to Bobby Marks for this graphic, by the way, ESPN salary cap general manager whiz type person. Y'all know Bobby Marks if you know basketball. But they own their first pick this year. They own Cleveland, Minnesota, and then the least favorable of those Cleveland and Minnesota picks will go to Phoenix. So they're going to have 2 first-round picks. Next year, they only have 1 first-round pick, but they also do have the opportunity to swap that pick with Cleveland or Minnesota if things were to change this season. Their pick next season is 1 through 8 top 8 protected, just like it is top 10 protected this season. It'll definitely be a top 10 pick this year, so it will not convey. If they are not a top 8 pick next year, that their pick would convey to Oklahoma City. So they do need to probably, that's why I think that them being bad next year will likely benefit them as well. And probably the timeline for their rebuild is not after this season, but more so after next season, to actually try to start making a run at being a contending team in the West. In 2027, they will have 3 first-round picks, which is their own Cleveland and Minnesota, and then the Lakers, which is top 4 protected. So if it's not in the top 4, they will get the Lakers pick as well, which is very possible, which could give them 3 picks, considering they are going to have to convey the worst of their own Cleveland and Minnesota picks to Phoenix. Same thing in 2029, by the way, going to have to convey their own Cleveland or Minnesota. Whoever has the worst pick there will also have to convey that pick. So they'll only have 2 draft picks again in 2029, assuming that Minnesota does not have a top 5 pick, which I don't think they will with Anthony Edwards. So that pick would not convey to Minnesota, or would not stay with Minnesota. Anyways, then in 2028, they have their own pick, but they can swap it with Cleveland if they want. 2030, they have their own pick. 2031, they have 2 first-round picks, which is their own, and then that Phoenix pick, which could absolutely end up being a lottery ticket. That's the type of pick that could very easily be a top 5 pick in the draft. 2031 feels like it's a long ways away. It's only about 6 years. I know that's a long time, but the Phoenix Suns are definitely still going for it now. They're going to go for it this year. They're going to go for it next year, in the couple of years, probably the next couple of years in the future, I think. Unless things go just absolutely horribly, I find it unlikely that they're really going to blow things up, despite the fact that I think that might be the best option they could do in terms of building for the future. But what that does mean is that there is a really good chance that come 27, 28, 29, you're looking at a really bad Phoenix Suns team, and that could easily extend into the early 2030s. That could wind up being a very valuable draft pick down the road. Now, is it worth focusing on too much right now? No, not exactly, but it could also wind up being a very interesting trade asset down the road as well, and that would not have to be as far down the road. So again, what they have is they have quite a lot of different assets that they have the ability to trade to upgrade their roster. And I actually kind of like their young talent as well. It's not great, but Keontae George is showing some flashes this year. 35% from 3 on 8 attempts a game, a nearly 2-to-1 assist turnover ratio. There's some improvement to his game this year, averaging 16.5 a game. Now, I'm not certainly convinced he is a primary guard in the NBA. In fact, I do not think he is. I don't think he's a primary ball handling type guard, but I think there's a lot of scoring talent there, a lot of youth, and a lot of potential with Keontae George. I think he's going to be a good player. He's 21 years old. I like him. Lauri Markkanen is having a down year and is still 20 points on almost 37% from 3. Again, like I said, across the board, kind of a down year from the last couple of years for him, and he's still been very solid. He is 27, so timeline wise might not fit with the youth of the rest of this core in quite as effective a way. But then you have John Collins just shooting 44% from 3 this year. That's a real trade asset. That could be another first round pick legitimately, or some sort of other assets. Jordan Clarkson is in the exact same boat. Guys like John Collins, Jordan Clarkson are very valuable pieces that a lot of NBA teams would be interested in, because those are veteran pieces who have experience playing in big moments and could come in and be contributors immediately to championship contending teams. Would be surprised, in all honesty, if either of those guys are on the roster by the deadline. Walker Kessler, if they were open to trading him, could bring in a haul. I would not be shocked to see a Walker Kessler haul exceed a first round pick. It could be even more. He is an absolute double machine. He's the most efficient 2-point scorer in basketball. And he's an elite level shot blocker as well. He's not a perfect player, but he is a really useful player for the skill set he has. Colin Sexton is in the same, maybe slightly too old for this core area at 26 years old at this point, but he's shooting 48%, 41.5% from 3, averaging 18 points a game this year. Has been really solid in his own right and has been able to be a decent playmaker himself. Taylor Hendricks showed some good signs last year. This year obviously got hurt really early in the season, so we haven't had much opportunity to judge off of him, and hopefully he comes back healthy from his injury. Now, I will say, Cody Williams, not loving that draft pick, 10th overall. Feels like that one very easily could come back to bite them, because it just doesn't seem like, again, it's early in his career, he's only 20 years old, but I don't know if he's going to figure it out the way that his brother J-Dub has in Oklahoma City. So I don't have a ton of faith in that. Isaiah Collier, the efficiency is really atrocious. He's done some interesting off the dribble stuff recently, I've seen on Twitter and stuff, but overall I don't think he's a great player. Steve Mikhailuk's not a part of the long-term plans. Neither, in all honesty, despite Johnny Juzang having a decent year, probably is Juzang, although I think you could make an argument for him as a bench guy. The guy honestly on the bench though who I'm most intrigued by is Bryce Sensabaugh. The efficiency's been legit. He's almost 40% from 3 on almost 5 attempts a game, averaging double figures as well, and the assist turnover ratio absolutely needs work, but there's real scoring potential with him, and another 21-year-old youth who's got a lot of interesting talent. So let's say a couple of these guys were to pan out and you were able to put out a lineup out on the court with Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, or Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, a couple of other pieces, Keontae George probably, and then a couple of the guys, and again, the opportunity to absolutely add a first round pick that is very high up this year and a ton of other draft assets over the next few years. They're going to have a ton of flexibility to try to upgrade their roster through the draft and through using their assets to acquire proven commodities. Overall, going to be a fascinating next couple of years to watch for the Utah Jazz, even if they're not really in contention this year or next year. Before we know it, the way things are going in Utah and the way Danny Ainge is mastermind brain work, I would not be shocked at all to see improvement from the Jazz and for them to be a contender here in a couple of years. So I hope y'all did enjoy the video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. Be back with more NBA content very, very soon. I appreciate y'all. Peace.